Okay. Okay, I think we're going on YouTube. We are live on Twitch. And here we are. Guys, welcome to episode 114 of the 1v1 podcast. And here is the next roundtable discussion. And this is on probably my favorite archetype in Ashes of Creation, the fighter. Oh boy, there's a lot to say about this one. A lot to say. And I just want to go around the table first. So you'll see the infamous Desert Bandit himself, our boy Zybak. How you doing, brother?
Doing good.
All right. And then we have our boy from Suspect, Dolyem. How's it going, dude?
It's going good.
And then we have our resident doctor, Dr. Burns. What's going on, brother?
Not much, dude. Happy to be here. Happy to talk fighter.
Oh, dude, I just want to get right into it, man. So, Zybak, let's go with the first question that I have. Which fighter ability feels most rewarding to land in combat, and what about its design, like i.e. its damage, its animation, its utility, that makes it stand out for you?
So I think everybody's going to have the same answer, or one of two answers. It's either going to be Maim or Cataclysm. They have a different spin. And mine is the ranged mechanic, particularly on Maim, when you talent into it. I think landing that, especially on someone at range, is fantastic, because the Maim is such a long wind up slam, hit the ground, and then this kind of relatively slow moving projectile erupts out of the ground and just hitting somebody with that, especially like in the current gear environment where that can crit for like 1k, is just like chef's kiss. Fantastic.
Yeah. And what about you, Dolyem?
It's between Cataclysm and actually Blitz also. Blitz is actually one of the most satisfying charge abilities I've ever seen in MMO. I think it's like really, it holds like weight to the animation. I mean, it's not like you're gonna be one-shotting anybody with it, but it still looks really good. But yeah, and of course, like Zybak said, Cataclysm is just like, yeah, who doesn't love seeing an explosion on the screen and seeing everybody take 1,000+ damage?
I think honestly, when you set up the stun and then you just kind of cock back and then bam, you know, like I will say I miss the spike animation. I really do, because I remember when we first saw Fighter and when they showed off Cataclysm, it had that kind of like the spikes kind of came out almost like a what is it, the Venus flytrap or whatever. It just looked really cool. But what about you, Burns? Like how do you feel when it comes to the most rewarding ability to land in combat?
Yeah, Maim. I like this two things about it, like the slow kind of arc that he does with it, like that
front
that's
flip
a
is
satisfying. It's very satisfying to watch. And then I like the sound too. Like if you just do it and listen to it, like it's it goes like it's like a beat drop almost. It sounds really good.
Yeah, I think Maim, and everybody, that was my answer first of all, is Maim. Like, I love Cataclysm, but there's just something about the sounds of the combat design when it comes to Maim specifically. It's just, and honestly, when you have enough haste, because I remember being in that one live stream where it was like Pirate Software were facing the two big raid bosses, and we were us, like me, Roar, Richie, like everybody were all in legendary, and I remember doing Maim and it was like instant, almost like you just boom, like it was just crazy with like insane gear. But yeah, I think Maim to me is probably one of the best well-designed abilities on the fighter. So yeah, I have to go with that. So okay, Dolyem.
Yes, sir.
Let's go with number 2. So are there any abilities in the fighter kit that feel clunky or out of place? What would you do to make them more appealing?
Okay, so first off, I'm going to sound like Steven for the rest of this stream probably, where he's always doing his disclaimer. Like, oh, it's all a work in progress.
Right.
Everything that I say could more or less be fixed with gear and TTK adjustments.
Right.
But with that being said, with that little grain of salt, I would say that Berserk almost feels kind of pointless. The only reason I ever use Berserk is to reduce my cooldowns. I don't like, it's the immunity to disables is okay, but it lasts for like what, a second, and your momentum's gone.
Yeah.
And you can't even break out. Like, you used to be able to break out of CCs, but it was good that they put it to the shout. I liked that they put it to the shout.
Same.
But with, like, you need momentum in the first place. It drains all your momentum. And yeah, the only thing I could see Berserk even useful for is to make other abilities able to be made. And besides that, stance dancing seems irrelevant with the current forms. And Cataclysm, although I love it, with the current TTK problem, getting it off in a big fight is like your 1 in 100 chance kind of deal, because you're gonna die really freaking quick whenever you cast it. But it's also really, really satisfying whenever you get it off, though.
So I want to ask you, so to the second part of the question, so let's start with Berserk. What could make Berserk more appealing? Like, how would you redesign that ability for you to for Berserk to make for it to feel good for you?
Well, for starters, I would make it actually feel like what a Berserk ability is supposed to do, which is
like a speed enhance, strength increase.
You technically get the strength increase and the speed enhance, but it lasts for such a short amount of time, you barely even notice it. So it might be more of like a momentum issue, but it's just one of those things where it's either not lasting enough or long enough with how it currently is implemented, or you just need to rework it in the sense where you're like swinging super fast, you're moving super fast, make it a 1.5 minute cooldown to make it like actually a really substantial ability or something, you know?
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, one way they could pretty easily like fix that would be just to have it not drain the momentum. Like, if they wanted to band-aid fix it, just make it not drain the momentum so fast.
Yeah.
Because right now, as he said, like, the only real power of Berserk is, for the most part, optimally resetting your cooldowns. That's the way everyone I know uses it, is they, blow everything and try to get the most bang for your buck out of your cooldown reset.
No.
What you do.
Right. And what about you, Burns? What ability for the fighter kit that feels clunky or out of place, and what would you do to kind of make it more appealing to use?
So that's mine as well. I like everything you guys said, and it seems to be like there's an issue with momentum building too.
Yes.
So especially in large scale PvP, because it's really just your bow shots, and you have to have, if you're going to be a fighter, in large scale PvP, you have to have a longbow. If you use anything other than a long range weapon, you're just going to get deleted. You can't compete against the firing squad of all the mages on the other side without getting deleted. So building momentum seems to be a bit of an issue. And what's been interesting is you can see them slowly start to march more abilities toward like, okay, well, now we're going to make this ability add some momentum. We're going to do this ability that adds some momentum. So I think they kind of understand there's an issue with it. But yeah, I mean, you build it so slowly, and then when you use it, Berserk lasts half a second. And because it burns through all the momentum super quickly. But relatively easy fix, just slow it down so we can actually use it a little bit longer. But yeah.
If I could have my way, like, I'd probably just redesign Berserk to where you basically get up to full momentum and the momentum slowly drains. So basically you would have, like, let's say 20% haste and 20% power increase, and then as momentum slowly drops, like, it goes like further and further down, like percentages go further and further down until it inevitably hits zero. Like, I think something like that could be actually really cool to use. That way, you can actually do a slew of different abilities, and even like kind of half the cooldown, just like it normally works. But I feel like Berserk is just kind of like I don't know what they were really going for with resetting all the cooldowns, because I know it feels very overpowered in certain ways that you could just reset everything, but I'm curious if they can do something more to that specific ability. Maybe I'll ask Grok. Who knows?
That wasn't my answer, by the way.
Yeah, no, go for it. I was going to ask you. Go for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I was going around the table. I was going around the table.
Just to be devil's advocate, I will defend Berserk. I I think it's a couple changes away from being really cool. I really do like the cooldown reset mechanic.
Yeah, same.
A lot, because that it turns into kind of like a thinking man's game with the cooldown reset, because like you could do a super low momentum berserk to get a reset on your movement skill when you need it to, you know, quickly close that gap, or like the reset for like a double execute. Like there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with that mechanic. So I don't want to see it just turn into like button press, more damage, more better. Like I kind of like that it's got some nuance to it as well. But yeah, it is kind of stupid that the other things don't really matter. It's mainly just the cooldown reset button, and people don't even look at their momentum bar right now because with the way Wallop is, you just don't even have any. Who cares?
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, Zybak. Like, so for you, like, what ability feels clunky or out of place?
The reason I picked this ability is because it has nothing to do with like tuning. And this ability is very good, by the way. I'm not saying it's bad. I know it's amazing. I use the hell out of it, and that is Knockout. I think it's just from a class fantasy perspective, kind of bizarre that fighters have like a finesse CC that breaks on damage. It breaks on bleeds. We have a bunch of bleeds. I don't know, from like a class fantasy perspective, like I'm playing the fighter berserker smash, like I just want to run in and smash, and then I just hit this guy with a knockout. Don't touch him. It's just I think that's just weird.
Right.
And especially when you factor in that we have so many like ways that we apply bleeds, and our kit like incentivizes us to apply bleeds, and then you have a skill that breaks on bleeds. I don't know. I just think it's kind of a weird like skill to have. It's very good. Obviously, it's an incredibly powerful skill, but I do just think it's bizarre, and I'd like to see it be like something else. Even like it seems like with the Rogue, they're sort of experimenting with like micro CC with like their 1 second silence, which seems to be like essentially an interrupt. What if Knockout was like a 1 second crowd control that didn't DR with anything else? It's literally just a disruption ability where it's like, oh, I see a mage casting this thing, maybe it doesn't have an animation time, boom, knockout. And it's like a reactive like skill. I don't know, I just think it's kind of weird to have like a polymorph on a warrior archetype. It's just like weird, right?
Yeah,
like a sleep for warrior. It's kind of weird.
Do you think potentially redesigning Knockout to be more of like a 1.5 second stun instead, so that way the bleeds can still be there?
I think it would have to be something that wasn't on the DR situation. Is kind of weird. Another idea I had was to make it be like Marionette, where it's got a damage threshold. Marionette's like a super weird ability. Does Marionette DR with anything? I don't think it does. It's kind of like its weird, its own little
maybe
weird
someone
thing.
in chat can say
it's not on any sort of wikis. I've tried to find it, but
yeah, I think for me it's kind of weird. Like my ability is actually more of a rotational ability, and it's Whirlwind. I hate like because every ability when it comes to like its weapon swings, like Lethal Blow or Overpower or whatever, all those abilities feel very good to hit because it's like almost instant. When you hit Whirlwind, it's like, we talk about MAME and how there's like a wind up with it, but the wind up on Whirlwind to me just feels so weird and and it takes me out of the rotation. I really don't like that. Like I want to be able to push that ability and just start whirlwinding. Like I don't want downtime in that regard. And it's weird because I don't mind the downtime technically with MAME, but I do mind it when it comes to Whirlwind. And I really think that Whirlwind actually needs like a little bit of a speed increase too. Depending on which passive you take for Whirlwind, whether it's like the one where you get the extra hit or it drains the momentum. Like I don't know. I think it needs something to make it feel like more of a flow. That I don't know, maybe you guys might disagree with me on that, but I feel like Whirlwind just kind of just feels a little weird in its current state. But
I only use it to avoid getting immobilized. That's literally my whole point of Whirlwind, at least in PvP.
Yeah, that seems to be the PvP use case. Yeah, sure. Is to like preemptively immune like a CC somebody's trying to do on you.
Okay.
It's got a bunch of weird like finicky bugs with it. It does apply stagger now, which is nice, but there's like so much weirdness with that ability where it like cancels itself, or I don't know. It's a weird one
thing too.
I loved it in phase 1 whenever it was never ending in PvE.
That was crazy shit. I remember that. Okay, so Burns, let's go to you on this one. So how do the fighters gap closing tools, like i.e. like the blitz, lunges, perform in dynamic PvP fights versus like the static PvE encounters?
I mean, I think that's the bread and butter of the fighter right now, because the TTK is so quick, and let's say the TTK gets longer, right? Let's say they give everyone more hit points or more resistance, whatever. It's getting in and out, like the mobility of the fighter right now. It feels like the class is designed like a Lancer. You get in, do as much of damage as possible, and get out. You know, you go in, you blow your load, and you get out. And then that feels like the most important part of the fighter. Like if you take the mobility away, you take leap, you take blitz out, I mean, this class straight sucks.
Yeah.
It's important because you get kited so much. Melee is at such a disadvantage in Ashes that without the mobility of the fighter, you're just dead in the water. So needs really important. Honestly, would love to have at some point in the future, maybe when you go weapon master, fighter, you get a second charge to your blitz ability, something like that. I love the movement. I think the movement feels great.
Okay.
Oh, and petition to change knockout to slap, because it's that hand icon, and it just sounds so much. Just slap. I think
slap.
I call it strong hand.
Yeah, strong hand. Yeah, something like that. Strong hand.
I would say, like, for me, like I think the gap closers are pretty good. And you know, we were before we hit go live, we were talking about Zybak's short, because there was a short that Zybak did where he was trying to go after a bard, and even with Zybak getting on his mount, him leaping over, blitzing over, could not catch this bard. So Burns, I want to ask you this question: how, in the sense of gap closers and trying to catch the enemy, because again, fighter is melee, like how efficient should we be when it comes to the other archetypes in getting to its opponent?
I mean, we have zero ranged abilities other than that little maim tail that we can send shooting out.
Right.
So having getting up there is really important. That's how we do damage, and we're going to talk about it later. But yeah, it causes some real problems right now in the current meta, where you just can't get close, otherwise you get deleted in a lot of situations. I mean, I feel like this class was designed by like one-on-one fights where there's some give and take with some classes and stuff, and there's some fun mechanics that way, but you get more than 8 people, and it doesn't really feel like the fighter holds up. So
yeah, I got you. And what about you?
Melee is such a disadvantage in the current milieu.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So there is a staggering difference between people that know how to move in Ashes of Creation versus people that do not know how to move. There are a lot of techniques you can do with dodge roll, jumping, bunny hopping. Yeah. There are things you can do in this game to move in a way that highly exploits fighters' movement in a negative way towards the fighter. So the thing with the fighter movement is it's super badass that you can just clear 30 meters, like, zip like 30 meters, boom, 30 meters again with the jump. The problem is when you face good players, that really doesn't matter, because the entire game is about tiny little micro bursts of movement. So sure, you can go 0 to 30 really quick, but can you go 0 to 5 over and over and over again? And what you'll notice with the rogue, if you've looked at the abilities, the rogue has lots of micro, like, dashes, micro movement speed bursts. In my opinion, is going to happen is that the rogue is going to be a much more effective uptime melee class, because it has more effective mobility. It's not about these big leaps that you need. Rarely do you need a big 30 meter charge. What you need to do is close that 10 meter gap. So I see a guy in chat, fighter is the least kiteable, but it's the only class that you need to really kite other than tank.
True.
Here's what proves my point. If you're a fighter in PvP and you are able to talent your blitz, cut the blitz range in the third. Your blitz is now a 10 meter range, but it has 3 charges that charge interdependently. Everyone would take that. Everyone takes that because that's a more effective movement skill.
100%.
Because the game is all about tiny little micro dashes of speed and especially Bard. Bard really shows this off. But
100%.
Any class can do it. If you fight a good tank as a fighter, they will embarrass you in a way that like you're just dumbfounded because they just hit you with all this little like finessey bullshit, and they don't beat you as a tank. They're not sitting there like, oh, I'm gonna pull up my shield and then hit you with a counterattack and melee you. No, they're like bloop, 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 and they're like dodging around CS:GO bunny hopping, and you're like, what the fuck is even happening? Because that's just how the movement is.
Right.
So I like it, but there are some other game factors that make it not great. Particularly snares. So I think the way snares are handled in this game is a little weird because they DR. That doesn't happen in WoW. Like as a warrior in WoW, you hamstring somebody, you can always hamstring them no matter what.
Right.
This game, that is not the case, and like snares go on DR super quick, and there's also some weird interactions with snares stacking to where you stack a snare and then it falls off quicker. There's some weird, like probably alpha things, but I would like to see maybe potentially melee snares not DR. So like range snares DR, like the Nova's DR, but not the melee snares if melee uptime is continually an issue. But yeah, there is a massive chasm between people that know how to move and know how to do the dodge roll, bunny hop, jump craziness versus people that aren't using that stuff.
I just want to ask you real quick, Zybak, about lunging assault. That ability is another ability that I feel is in the realm of clunkiness too, because it gives you such a really short rooted dash with a hit at the end. And so it's like, if you really don't time that ability right, you whiff it entirely. And people can say, oh, well, it's a skill shot ability or whatever, but it doesn't feel good. And the dash feels kind of minimal too. So I was just curious about that particular ability.
It's super difficult to use.
Right.
In a lot of ways, like, it's difficult to use, especially when the server decides like to just like shoot you through your target rather than actually hit them. Maybe, that is one thing I would like to see them, if it is a problem with uptime, who knows what other changes they're going to make, have that be the little micro charge, make it a targeted ability, give it make it a 5 meter charge, like just something to counter a zip from a Bard, right?
Right.
I think, in my opinion, the kiting in a PvP context is not coming from somebody getting 30 meters on you. It's them getting 10 meters on you and you just never being able to catch up.
Okay. And what about you, Dolyem? As far as some of the, how do the fighters gap closer tools like the assaulting lunge or the blitzes or anything like that? How do you feel that those perform in a PvP environment versus like PvE?
Well, first want to make sure, is my mic working? My headset was giving me some problems. All right.
Yeah,
so I missed some of what Zybak said, so sorry if I repeat anything. But honestly, as far as PvE side, they're just momentum generators is all they are. Like, you don't really got to worry about a gap closer and most PvE stuff. That leap strike or whatever is awesome for avoiding boss damage stuff, so that makes it really nice. So it's not really a gap closer, it's a gap maker sometimes. And generally in larger scale PvP, Blitz is the only gap closer that I use where you have to use leap strike to get out of the shit. And that kind of feels bad to me, because whenever I think of like class identity with fighter, I'm not thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna jump in and out like guerrilla tactics. I'm thinking, as a fighter, I'm gonna be frontline, messing people up, and being there with like the tanks right next to me. I don't want to constantly be jumping out all the time, but that's not exactly easy to balance whenever it comes to large scale anyway. So it's kind of hard to say with that, especially with the, again, TTK problems and gear issues. So that makes it more of an issue for that. It's not necessarily the problem of the fighter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think what's kind of funny to me is that I feel like the fighter was made and designed for PvE, because as a PvE player, I have really no issues with the fighter kit. It's when you introduce PvP to the fighter that all these issues start to kind of come out. And I think that's where it's very hard, because I'm telling you, I love playing the fighter in PvE. I love it. I can go to Citadel all day and do an 8-hour session of grind. I can't do that on the Ranger. I'll blow my brains out. I can't do it, but I can definitely do it on the fighter. I have no problem with it.
Yeah, I will say in like smaller scale PvP, fighter isn't nearly as bad.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's just so, and the real issue is they're not balancing around small scale. They're balancing around 8v8s plus. So if it's not good at doing 8v8 plus, you have to change something there. And personally, it's going to be down to, I hope once they fix the enchanting stuff that they're talking about doing, that it makes a big difference with survivability of fighters. Because unless they're going to be in a fight for, even right now, I'd take like 5 to 10 seconds in a big fight. That would be a huge improvement for me.
Yeah.
But I'll take that.
That's tripling the TTK.
Yeah, dude, it's like whenever I go into, so anytime I'm in a big fight and I do that engagement with Blitz, so doing the gap closing there, I'm not even thinking about getting healed. I'm not thinking about getting a heal from a cleric. I'm thinking, okay, what ability can I get off to do as much damage as I can and then leap strike away so I don't get one shot?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, even if you have your cleric throw soothing glow charges on you, so I mean, it can last a while. It can last, several, 20 seconds if you have everything stacked on you. It's still, you don't have enough time because it's 300 maybe hit points per second that it's ticking, right? So the combination right there in large scale, you just get deleted is so freaking fast. And the problem is, bards have that insta cast silence. Sure, you can blitz in there and you wind back for your cataclysm, and then all of a sudden nothing happens, and you look around for half a second, and then you're dead.
And I'm glad you said that, because another thing that drives me nuts is there's no actual indicator that you just got silenced. You have to look down and suddenly your whole action bar is just grayed out. You're just like, well, fuck.
Yeah.
So I wish there was a better indicator that, hey, you just got silenced.
So this next question is going to go to you, Zybak, and of course, we all know the TTK issue, right? Like everybody, we've seen Nice's video, if you've seen mine, you've talked about TTK plenty of times, Zybak. Burns talked about TTK. So the question is, what does the fighter's damage profile feel balanced between burst and sustained output, or do you feel like you lean towards one style more than the other? And it's probably burst.
I think I like the way it is. Honestly, you can pull off the Giga Burst combo, which is super satisfying.
Absolutely.
Again, we're not going to talk about TTK right now. That's not worth doing. No one does it. But when you do it, and actually, I used to do this back when the gear was less crazy, when people were still fighting each other with sticks and stones. What you would do, especially if you were fighting a cleric, was you'd get full momentum. You'd use all your abilities, use all your combos, and then you'd berserk and do it all over again and do back-to-back, your full kit back-to-back. And that was just a really cool, fun thing to do, especially if you set it up right, where you got the wombo combo twice.
Oh, yeah.
And then other combos, the opening combos, the fighter where you do the overpower to get the stagger, knockout, cataclysm CCs, main lethal blow. You can set up some really cool stuff. But again, right now we're in the realm of LOL fucking 3K MAME. Who cares? If you got yeah. But yes, in a more reasonable environment, I don't think they need to change anything. I think it's actually pretty cool.
Okay. And what about you, Dolyem, as far as the damage profile for the fighter? Do you feel like you lean more into burst, or do you feel like the fighter has actually some sustained capabilities of damage?
It definitely has a lot of sustain in PvE. But whenever it comes to PvE or PvP, you have to go burst, in my opinion. Like he was saying, you just try to get 2 rotations of your entire kit in. Your whole goal is kill them before they kill you, because it's such a quick interaction. So
let me try to do as much. Let me re-ask you this question differently then, Dolyem. For the fighter specifically, what would be your ideal TTK? If with your PvP set in mind, how long do you think a good skirmish in a 1v1 setting should go for?
Oh, in a 1v1?
Yeah, like if like you met up with someone in the desert and it was just like they went combatant, you go combatant, you're gonna fight it out. Like how much of a TTK should it be?
I'd say it would have to depend on the matchup, because a tank's going to be able to last longer than, say, a mage, as far as just taking damage.
Let's say another fighter
kind of deal.
Fighter.
Fighter on fighter. 15 to 20 seconds, because they have sustainability with like their heals and stuff, and there's plenty of like staggers and stuff like that.
Okay.
But that's preferable, not obviously not what it is.
Right. Well, what's crazy is that remember when they did that one PTR thing, or was it PTR, or they did like a fresh realm and people were like going corrupt and just doing PvP, and people were like all in the same
and like
gear,
low gear. They were all like white to greens and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, it felt great then.
And I think the TTK was around that. Was like anywhere, people were saying anywhere between like 12 to 25 seconds depending on the archetype, but people felt like that amount of time was actually plenty considering what it is now, because again, I think depending if you're like going up against a mage as a fighter, or let's say you're going up against the cleric as a fighter, like those TTKs can definitely range, right? And Zybak, I just want to ask you real quick, like what in your mind, since you've done so much PvP, you've done a lot of 1v1, even 2v1 skirmishes, like what is your ideal TTK?
I would say probably in a similar range. I'd honestly have to just go and look at my footage and see what that maths out to be. But I would say at least probably double what it is now. Whatever, I have to go and come back to you with the actual numbers. But I would say, I don't think that's that crazy to say that maybe slow it down 50% and just start from there without being too dramatic.
Yeah, for sure. And what about you, Burns? Like,
well, okay. I mean, I did just hit over 500 fizz power, so my TTK is a little quick right now. It is
one shot of people.
So yeah, I'm in the same range as them.
Okay. I mean,
for the viewers that don't know, if anybody has seen my clips where I am like 3-shotting people, I'm at 400 physical power and he's at 500. Scale linearly, like it gets more powerful as you go.
Jesus,
that's some context there for the viewers.
All right, Burnsy.
So intended.
Yeah, working as intended. Let's go to you.
I mean, I'm having fun now.
Of course you are. Let me see. When facing multiple enemies, do the fighter's AoE abilities like Brutal Cleave hold up, or do they fall short compared to its single target skills? So you have like Whirlwind, Brutal Cleave. Like, how do you feel AoE is on the fighter?
AoE feels fun. I mean, you got Cataclysm and Maim, and you have a lot of AoE abilities. Single target, yeah, like I like Execute a lot. I think that's fun, but I don't know. I'm okay with it being. It feels like there's a bit more AoE, and I'm kind of okay with that.
Okay. And what about you, Zybak? Like, how do you feel with like it's the fighter's AoE ability kit?
Are we talking about? I assume this is more of a PvE geared question.
No, I mean, just
if it is, that's more of a. I agree with Burns. Then it's kind of like, it is what it is, and I'm kind of okay with it in a PvE context.
Okay. And what about
in PvP? Obviously, it's like totally different. But yeah,
I think in PvP, it's just one of those things where most people treat fighter as a kamikaze. Like, if you're going to go in, you're probably going to die, or you're going to try to go into a group of people. Like, if the ranger vines everything, you're going to go in Whirlwind, Cataclysm, and then just probably leap out before you die, hopefully. It just depends on like how you can do that.
One of the core problems with a lot of the fighter like PvE or AoE abilities is that they're actually skill shots, which people are going to be like, well, just get good, right? Well, with server lag and like quickly people move, it actually makes these abilities completely useless in PvP. Nobody uses Brutal Cleave in PvP because you whiff it so easily. You almost always whiff it against somebody that's moving. Right. And that's another problem with Whirlwind, is that Whirlwind, believe it or not, I think has a 3-meter range, which is half of the range. It's so easy to miss this on.
You okay, Zybak?
I'm not the only one lagging, am I?
No.
Nope.
I think it's just Zybak.
Players that are moving.
Oh, there he goes.
And they go, why would anyone ever use overpower?
Right.
Yeah.
Brutal cleave is better in every way. Worse in a single target context. It's especially worse in PvP, but overpower, when you factor in the cast time, actually does more single target damage. So there's a tip for you. You fighter players that might not know that. But in PvP in particular, it's a vastly superior skill because you can't miss it unless their character is in the middle of a dodge animation. When that thing lights up, you hit it, it will always hit no matter what. And what that results in is you will absolutely overpower somebody from 15, 20 meters away, whereas Brutal Cleave will just miss. Brutal Cleave will just miss even if you're right next to him.
Right.
So, yeah.
And what about you, Dolyem? How do you feel the AoE abilities hold up to its single target counterparts, both in PvP and PvE?
PvE, I think it feels fantastic. You just see a million numbers pop up, especially if you're running ferocity or whatever the one form is,
right?
With the bleeds. You see bleeds all over the screen. Even though I think bleeds are very weak, but PvP wise, it's if you basically have to wait until a ranger gets vines off.
Yeah.
And if they caught like 5 or more people, then you jump in and do a maim real quick. And then you jump back out. But yeah, okay. Like he was saying, it is pretty hard to hit with a brutal cleave whenever it comes to PvP for sure.
Okay. And let's start with you on this one, Dolyem. Which kind of passive that is tied to the momentum mechanic has the biggest impact on your playstyle?
Say that one more time. It kind of
like which passive that's tied to the momentum mechanic has the biggest impact on your playstyle?
Specifically, momentum.
Mm-hmm.
I guess
because momentum to me feels like there really isn't anything. There's a couple of abilities that have a momentum generation, but it's like if I think of like Fury Warrior, of like what can like your generators and your spenders, like I feel like momentum. Yeah. I feel like the fighter doesn't really have that, so to speak, and I mean, it does because there is spenders, right? You have like your wallop now that spends your momentum.
If I had to choose a spender, it'd be wallop probably, just because of the trips and the heals. It's the most useful one. Maybe whirlwind also for CC immunity to get out of something, but I'd say I'd rather have it for the buffs from forms than I would rather spend it, honestly.
Yeah, like how do you feel about momentum as a generator for the fighter? Because I feel like momentum, and this kind of goes with a lot of the other classes too, because again, there's like mana, and then there's like this third resource, right, that every class is going to have, and then your abilities always use mana, but then there's some abilities that use momentum. So like, how do you feel about momentum in general? Like, is it a good stat or a good resource to have, or do you feel like it just feels kind of weird and out of place?
At the moment, it is very weird and out of place. It's like, it feels like it's only there because people expect like a rage mechanic for fighter warrior classes, mm-hmm. but it's not implemented in a way that's actually satisfying.
Okay.
So like, as we were saying earlier, generating momentum is a nightmare, especially in PvP. Like Burns was saying earlier with the longbow, I actually have a longbow and a shortbow on me for fights, because once they get within range, I toss on my short bow and rapidly generate as much rage or momentum as I can, mm-hmm. because it doesn't register off of your damage. It registers off how many hits you're doing. Right. So I toss on my short bow, I get a bunch of momentum really quick, and then I'll jump in and do whatever I got to do. But that being said, it's the spenders really aren't anything special. The biggest spender is Berserk, and you don't even care that you're spending all your momentum. You're only giving a crap because it's resetting your cooldowns. So it's like the Berserk itself, the cost is, okay, I'm getting rid of all of my momentum to do this, but you don't even really think about that. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't really give a crap that you're spending your whole bar of momentum to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it needs work. And I can't even, like, off the top of my head give you like a fix for what momentum would be, because I feel like that requires a lot of different abilities to do that, and they all have to be satisfying. But it's that'd be a long conversation in itself. See if one of them have any ideas behind that.
Yeah. Well, I'll go to you, Burns. Like, how do you feel about momentum as a resource in general for the fighter? Like, what do you feel like its shortcomings are? Like, is there any like positives of momentum that you think the fighter kit serves?
So, like, the class power that I thought coming from a cleric, I thought divine power was done very well. Okay. You know, you want it high for the overall healing buff. That is something as a cleric you're thinking about, because there are certain abilities that you'll want to use it on. So, you know, something with a long cast time. Okay, hey, it's worth using some divine power here, and you start to get a good idea for how much divine power you have, how much using it at certain times will take. That feels really good. As a healer, you are constantly aware of your divine power. With the momentum, it builds so poorly. What in PvE, totally fine, right? PvE, great. Hey, not too many problems there. I mean, yeah, it does seem to spend a little quick, especially with Berserk, but with PvP, so I talk about large-scale PvP a lot because that's the most consequential PvP in the game, right? That's the most consequential action in the game. You want a node destroyed, large-scale PvP. You want a castle ownership, large-scale PvP, right? Big caravan battles, all this stuff, large-scale PvP. Fighters are hampered so much in large-scale PvP because you can't really build a lot of momentum. You are your main class resource. That pool, just maybe a little tick here, little tick there with when you're getting shots off with your longbow. So I feel at its core is flawed, that there needs to be some other way to gain momentum, or maybe increased momentum or something with concurrent longbow hits, something like that. It's not something I do think about it a little bit, but mostly because if I don't in large scale PvP, I'm dead. I like the blitz ability where the passive on blitz, where you get extra momentum when you blitz in, because previously before the CC break was switched to the shout, you had to have some momentum in order to berserk to get the freak out, right? Like you were dead if you didn't. So like it is not when comparing it to the cleric, especially, it's the momentum system mechanic is lacking significantly.
Okay. And what about you, Zybak? Like, how do you feel like momentum works for your fighter kit? Do you feel like you're always working against it? Is it not complementing what you're trying to do? Like,
I like it conceptually. Like, I don't think the mechanic needs to go away. I think even in PvE, like, even if you go on the server right now and like see how long it takes you to get a full momentum bar in PvE with 100% uptime, it's a slog. It takes a really long time. So from a feel perspective, I just like to see that be faster. I'd like to maybe it's just a more volatile resource where you're building it up faster and spending it faster, and maybe it has less impact. Right now, it's like this battery that takes forever to charge, and then you get to use it for a split second, and it's like kind of okay. I think part of the reason it feels so bad in PvP right now, and again, you got to sprinkle in the TTK on every single thing we say right now, because think about it. Think about how long the PvP engagements are right now. Our class resource in PvP right now is basically irrelevant if you're playing a fighter as a fighter. Now, yes, in sieges, fighters are terrible, basically just terrible rangers. Nobody actually uses melee skills in big fights. So yeah, you can get some momentum, but like, you don't really build momentum in PvP, in large scale PvP, using your actual real fighter kit skills. So it just feels like kind of horrific in that regard. So yeah, I mean, but I like it overall, and I wouldn't want to see it change dramatically other than maybe speed it up. I think it's hard to say what should change, because right now we're just in such a crazy clown world of stats. Like, we all have rocket fuel in our characters, and I just would like to see how it plays with that not in the game.
Right. Burns, did I ask you the last question to you? Did I direct it to you first, or was it Dolyem? Dolyem? I think it was Dolyem. Okay.
Yeah, we started with him.
Okay. And let me go with you now, Burns. So for this one, are there any passives? So think of like all of the circle points on your talent tree that feel underwhelming or fail to influence your decision in combat. And if there are, like, how would you kind of redesign or retool those specific passives? Are there any kind of passives that you just never take?
I mean, brutality, right? Where brutal cleave gives 1 wounded stack. I mean, TTK is so quick it doesn't matter. With a longer TTK, that will matter. Okay, numbers wise, we'll have to play with that. It does seem like so when they originally talked about the fighter, it was, hey, there will be the anti-heal mechanic from this class, which is huge, right? You get some kind of anti-heal mechanic, some blight mechanic or whatever, and that's usually like a mechanic as any other player that you really have to worry about. Hey, I've got this anti-heal buff on me right now. I better get this cleansed or I got to get the freak out. Nobody cares about wounded. There is zero consideration of that. I think even when they fix the TTK, wounded won't have as much of an impact as a lot of people think, partially because it's really hard to stack. And yeah, I don't think the numbers really bear out super high for that.
I think some of that is also the stats. Like the really good clerics right now are healing for 150% of a health bar. Like if you play a cleric and you've got gear, you're healing like 6Ks. Like it's like
yeah, it's
like
ridiculous.
Who cares if it's 50% dampened when you're healing for, like, it just doesn't matter. So yeah, sorry.
And
Continue.
TTK still hurts.
It's not even so much a TTK. It's just like everybody's got rocket fuel stats. It's just
totally.
like, yeah, we're
it's
knocked out like crazy. Yeah.
So what about you, Zybak? Is there any passives on the tree that you feel like you just never bother taking?
I'm going to say that all of the passives are entirely underwhelming. Nobody cares at all about any of the momentum passives with their current iteration. I don't think about it at all in any capacity. Nobody does, because we are all a slave to Form of Celerity regardless. In fact, we are such a slave to Form of Celerity in PvP. It's PvP sprinkling, by the way. Yes. In PvP, if you're not in Form of Celerity, I don't know what you're doing. In fact, they could remove the passive from Form of Celerity and everyone would still use it. With the way momentum is right now, the passives aren't valuable enough. You don't ever exist in a high momentum state for any reasonable amount of time. You can't even really tell. I guess with Form of Celerity, the movement speed, it is nice to be able to move slightly faster than 100% speed just to catch up to somebody in a foot race.
Mm-hmm. How many times has that mattered for you, though?
Sorry, say again?
How many times has that actually mattered for you,
It's not something I notice. I literally don't notice it at all. They're incredibly underwhelming. Nobody exists with the way you play fighter. Nobody has any momentum, like any serious amounts, because you're constantly using wallop, which drains your momentum.
And berserk.
So these passives are so minimal in actuality that they don't matter, which I would be kind of okay with if they were just very minor things. But the problem is that the forms are on global cooldown, so nobody ever changes or thinks about it. They're not worth changing. It's literally a DPS loss to do it. I could rant about the forms for a while. Take them off the global cooldown. Remove the animation.
Agreed.
Remove that. That's my number one suggestion. They took a lot of my suggestions and literally put them in the game, except that one, my number one suggestion. Fuck.
Yeah. What about you, Dolyem? Like, what passives on your talent tree, like, do you feel like are, like, I know for me, like, I never use lunging assault. So like the passive to that, it's like the 2 charges, it seems like it would be really good. You add additional charge and you get some additional momentum. The other one that I feel that I used to play with and I realized wasn't, like, I didn't usually end up having was overdrive, which was the whirlwind passive, where it basically consumes your momentum. And I'm like, I don't know if I thought I would like it, and the more I played with it, the more I realized like this passive kind of sucks. Maybe I'm using it incorrectly, but I didn't like using that passive personally.
Well, first off, I agree with Zybak. The form passives are fucking pretty much useless. You don't need them at all. The mana regen is okay. Like it's a nice little bonus to have, but yeah, like I said earlier, stance dancing is pretty much non-existent in this. You are a slave to celerity, as he was saying. But this is another PvP focus thing here. It works for PvE, but reinvigorating lethal blow and consuming lethal blow, and lethal blow in general, as it's supposed to act, where it's a finisher, right? Well, in PvP, you don't know their ending health, so none of that is useful. You don't get.
Funny is they don't know either. No one does.
Right? Yeah, nobody knows. But freaking, it's like with TTK, it's not even that big of an issue right now because clearly there's a bigger issue of dying too quickly in general.
Right.
But if that wasn't an issue, you would never be able to time a lethal blow to kill somebody to get reinvigorating lethal blow, or you wouldn't get the consuming lethal blow to get your health and mana back and all that kind of stuff. And you also aren't going to get what you really could time correctly for a efficient lethal blow, because that 25%, like, okay, are they at the top of the 25%? Are they in the middle of the 25%? Are they towards the bottom? Your lethal blow in PvP is kind of a dumb concept. Like any ability that requires you to know and time for a finisher is kind of a moot point with the way HP is represented right now in PvP. And then also I agree with you with both of the whirlwind passives are pretty much kind of meh. Like,
yeah, I think
I'm not like, oh my god, like, yeah, these are gonna be awesome for my build or whatever. It was great in PvE whenever you did the never-ending whirlwind back in phase 1, but it's really nothing now as far as like the overdrive goes, and also the finisher for whirlwind.
I kind of the cinematic whirlwind is just it's a additional last hit at the end. And this is the thing with passives that I have a problem with, is that they go way too safe for this game. Like, everything is so generic, you know what I mean? And I really want them to, like, now is the time to experiment. I'd rather go wild and having some pretty crazed passives and abilities, because we have years to like fix or think, yeah, this passive is a little broken, we probably need to redesign it to make it a little bit more not as crazy. But I feel like a lot of the passives, when I see the ranger or going into the fighter, they just seem a little safe, you know, which for a gamer means not that fun, you know what I mean? Like, and I want them
boring.
Basically, yeah. Like, a lot of this, it's just not. They're boring, man. Like, I want them to be.
What you're describing happened with the Bard, right? It was super exciting, super fun, all these things, and they've been slowly scaling it back to, oh, okay, maybe you won't be a DPS and a support, you'll just be more of a support, right? They are walking that back from the extreme position that it was at. I don't think a fighter ever really got that, though.
No, not at all.
Bucky's got that shit from Limitless. That's all I can really like. Looking at the Bard and the Rogue, it's like, whoa, what's going on here,
dude? Yeah, he's starting to prove something at this point. Jesus. Okay, so Zybak, let's go with you on this next one. So let me see. I actually think I'm going to skip this next question because I feel like we already talked about passive, so I'm going to go into the next one. So how responsive do you feel like the fighter's weapon mechanics, like the weapon swings, the hit feedback, feel in the heat of battle? Like, do you feel
I think
like
it's actually fantastic?
Yeah.
Like, full out, especially this, like, or like, that's one of those things that generally games don't do well, like, especially MMOs in general. Like, usually, like, I think that's why people are so optimistic about this game, is because that's something that's so hard to nail down. It's so hard to nail down the feel and the movement and the character acceleration and the client controller and the hit feedback and all the animation stuff. Like, that's like, it's so nebulous and weird and hard to nail down that games with like hundreds of millions of dollars can't nail it down. And the fact that it's this good this early is pretty amazing, and I think it's only going to get better as they like slowly optimize like the servers and just speed things up by, like, you know, 1% gain here, 1% gain there. I'm actually really impressed. I really can't fault that at all, and it did great.
And what about you, Dolyem? Do you feel like the fighter's passives reinforce his identity as a relentless melee brawler.
Wait. Was that the question? Did I answer
Yeah, this is a different question you asked there, Vlad. You were asking about responsiveness of weapon mechanics.
Oh, shit. I
was like, am I
so sorry.
I was went off on a different question. He's such a politician.
Zybak, do you smell toast?
Shit, my bad. Okay,
you're good.
How responsive do you feel like the fighter's weapon mechanics, like its weapon swing, the hit feedback, audio, feel like in the heat of battle? Do you feel like there's any adjustments that you might feel like could be needed?
I feel like it is really solid. The audio cues and all that of stuff are fantastic. The only thing I would change isn't even for fighter. It's like we were talking earlier with silences. I would want a cue to let me know like my cataclysm didn't just go off or my maim just didn't go off kind of deal, because I suddenly am not able to even cast it, because with it currently it's just literally just a really awkward silence cricket noise basically, where you're just like, oh well shit, now I'm dead.
Even just the sound effect would probably go a long way.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
That. Yeah, Pockets mentioned that in the chat earlier. He was saying that they were discussing possibly making a sound cue for silence, which I think is a really good idea.
And what about you, Burns? Like, how do you feel like with the weapons mechanics, like the weapon swings and stuff like that for the two-handed sword? Like, how do you feel? It does.
It's great. I made a whole video on it. It's the one with the orc fighter. Where I talk about the like momentum difference between momentum and inertia, right? And like how the fighter has to like position his feet and stuff. And yeah, I think they've done a great job with it. And the feedback feels good. It doesn't feel like Guild Wars 2, where you're just moving around and swinging like perfectly, no problem. There's like you actually have a little bit of feedback with your movement and stuff, and that feels fantastic. You feel rooted in like actually in the game, way more immersive.
Yeah, I want to just give a shout out to the audio team who designed the fighter, because I'm telling you, when I was in the pre-alpha 2 and I was playing fighter, and I was like, the very first time I hit maim, oh my god, it was fantastic. I've said this so many times on my stream. It is still the most satisfying melee ability I have ever hit in an MMORPG. Like,
they really nailed it. Yeah,
it's so good. Now there's a couple of other things that I think, as far as like feel and everything like that. Like, I still feel like a whirlwind needs to have a faster, like rapid, you push it, it goes, you know what I mean? I hate that kind of thing. That's my only beef with it.
Sounds good though.
It does. I do love the sounds 100%. Dolyem, let's start with you on this next one. Does the fighter's weapon versatility switch between like a one-handed to a two-handed meet your expectations, or do you feel like you would want like more options? And I think right now this is kind of a hard question, because most people are going to use two-handed swords. We don't have two-handed axes. We don't have pole arms. We don't have maces or anything like that. But how would you envision the fighter's different weapons? Like, how would you make them different? Let's put it into that kind of question when it comes to like the two-handed axe or the pole arm or everything like that.
So I have tried sword and board with fighter just to test it out, and
how was that?
It was okay. It wasn't really noticeably different or anything. Like, you hit faster. You weren't obviously doing as bursty damage or whatever, but
right.
It was okay. But as far as versatility and switching between them, I don't really notice too much between different weapons. I haven't really tried any like the physical / magic weapons like wand, physical, and all that shit. But as far as how I think that they could make it better and have like a more noticeable difference between like someone that wants to use a spear or someone that wants to use an axe, I would say weapons should affect the abilities in certain ways, like buffs and stuff like that. So say you have a two-handed axe, you crit harder on cleave, or if you have a spear, that cleave has a further range. So you could change your play style based on a weapon, and to me that's like a class identity of what a fighter would be. Is you're a fighter with a certain type of weapon is going to fight differently than a fighter with another type of weapon.
Dude, could you imagine if pole arms had like a 10 10-meter range or something like that.
Exactly,
you know what I
dude.
mean? Like, it's just like,
imagine chasing a motherfucker down with a pole arm as opposed to a freaking mace. Like, like you don't have to be right up on their ass. You could be poking them and shit. So.
I mean, there was a video that Burns made explaining, because Steven has talked about this, and he basically said that different weapon types, such as the axe, the mace, the sword, and the sword, he described it as being a well-balanced weapon swing animation comparatively to the axe, which could have a more wider swing, but more narrow in distance. So every weapon is going to have its own distance, its own carve, a thing. And the other thing too is like, this all honestly goes along with like the weapon passives, which the weapon passives to me are, they're just a snooze fest. I'm just gonna be honest. I really do not like the weapon talents at all. I think some of them are a little interesting when you go into the mid, which is like executioner, or you go into like the top weapon trees, but I think the majority of all those points feel so anecdotal, you don't even feel what's going on. And we'll probably talk about this later, but
I feel like they're kind of placeholder too, because it's so much copy paste.
100%. I mean, I'm just giving feedback as to like, because I don't want them to think that we actually like it. You know what I mean? Like, please keep it, please give a placeholder, change it into something better. But
and I would say, to even iterate on that, to make forms more interesting, you could have forms get different buffs based on what weapon type you have. I think that could be a good potential.
Okay, Burnsy. So how do you feel when it comes to the weapon versatility? Like, how would you think going from a 200 axe to a 200 mace compared to a pole arm is going to feel on the fighter?
Yeah, I want the differences to be pretty exaggerated, because I have used at times, I mean, times in leveling too, I would use a one-handed and some weird offhand, but like it did feel different. I would like the differences to feel a little exaggerated. And I agree with you too. I think the passives, the skill trees for those weapons as they stand now are snooze fest. They're boring. So jazzing those up. Yeah.
And what about you, Zybak?
I mean, I think a lot of it does come down to the fact that the weapon trees are just very bare bones and basic. But I will say, to say one thing nice, I think the fighter in particular has a really interesting dynamic with their melee weapon and their ranged weapon. A lot of the classes in the game don't, like, especially if you're a ranged class, you don't engage with the weapon swapping like at all in any real meaningful way. Whereas if you watch like my PvP clips, I am really leaning on that short bow. I do a lot of short bow things for various mechanical reasons. We're not going to go in that rabbit hole, but there's a lot of really cool stuff. Yeah, well, it's not just momentum. It's a few other things that are even crazier than that. But I do like that part where it's like, some guy gets a little distance on me and I can't break the distance. I just whip out my short bow, and like there is like, it is kind of fun. But I would like to see more differences, especially in the melee weapons. They're all very samey. Maybe get really crazy with the weapon speed, like weapon attack speed, the weapon range, like spears, obviously longer range. But I think just with time, it'll get better. I think a lot of it really is just the passive trees are so similar. Even like ranged weapons and melee weapons are incredibly similar in terms of like their actual mechanics. So I think a lot of it probably is placeholder.
Okay. I feel like we've talked about this next question. Dolan, did I ask you, or was Zybak the?
You asked me on the last one.
Okay, Burns. How does the fighter's mobility stack up against other melee classes when it comes to like Bard? We have Rogue coming out. Like, how do you feel like the mobility is in the sense of like the hierarchy there?
I mean, compared to tank, right? Compared to tank mobility, or lack thereof. So I mean, that's a hallmark of the class. Right. Steven has already hinted at mobility being a part of fighter secondaries. So if a class were, a tank were to pick a fighter secondary, that would have some effect on like mobility, for example. He said that Jamie was streaming a while ago, and Steven dropped in on his live stream, and that was a conversation there. So Intrepid views mobility as one of the calling cards of the fighter. So I mean, yeah, it's essential. So
in that way, wouldn't you think it would be like the number one most mobile class in the game? Like if they're getting a whole school of augmentation labeled mobility, you know what I mean? Like,
and I think that is right. Has that confirmed? I don't know if that's confirmed yet. That's an educated guess.
I would assume too. Like
it was confirmed.
Rogue is confirmed as supposed to be the most mobile class in the game.
Oh, okay.
Rogue.
But
okay.
Yes.
So yeah. But I wonder if that is going to be one of the schools of augmentation.
It's going to be Bard still, by the way. Just letting everybody know. It's still going to be. Totally. It's still going to be Bard. Bard is actually going to be the most mobile class. They can say what they want, but
yeah, they can give the fighter a school of augmentation called mobility. Bard is still going to top it. Like, and I think that's a little bit of the issue here, right? Is that in most PvP MMOs, melees always get shafted. Usually, like it's especially when you're playing a melee, you have to understand that you are shafted. You have your gap closers that you go into, and I don't know what they can do. And I feel like sometimes like a little bit of speed increases could actually help, like, you know, like in these short burst things, right? Like you get like a 15% movement speed increase for 3 seconds or 5 seconds, you know, depending if you passive into it or whatever. I think the fighter needs to be able to gap close. You know, because if you're going to have the Bard and all these other range classes, like even the Ranger with vines, like it's like they can get pretty freaking far, you know, so it's like, yeah, like it's just, I don't know, man. Like if you're going to have the fighter be known for something, it needs to be like pretty well at it, you know, and I feel like it's not even third best.
So the thing of it is, it's not just about mobile, and I had a whole rant about this, so I'll try to keep it short. It's not just about the distance covered. It's about the effectiveness of the distance covered. Bard is the most mobile class, not because it probably still does cover the most square footage, but it covers the most square footage in the most effective and controlled ways, which is tons and tons and tons of little zip, 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 zip. It doesn't matter if he's 30 meters away or if he's 6 meters away. I can't touch him either way. But the fact that he can do it so frequently is what's important, which is why I say Rogue is going to have the most effective melee uptime kit, because it has the most amount of little zip dash, you know, dodges.
Right.
It's got the most effective kit. Yes, it doesn't have 2 30-meter jumps, but those 2 30-meter, like, that doesn't really matter, especially against good players that know how to dodge, roll, bunny hop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all that nonsense.
It does have 30-meter dashes, though.
I mean, though, it does. It's just going to be better. In terms of melee uptime, it's just going to be better because it has the dashes.
I mean, what if you played like fighter, right? And then you go into the school of augmentation for mobility, right? You could potentially have like 2 blitzes, you know, or 2 heroic leaps, you know, and use the school of I don't know. I mean, who knows?
Fighter
right?
Bard for what's that? The little dash called they have, the Bards.
Oh, the boot scoot, or what is it?
Yeah, I'd rather take that. Slide. I'd rather have that than another blitz.
What about you, Dolyem?
I'm pretty much on the same boat. I definitely don't notice form of celerity movement buff. Like that, we were talking about that earlier with celerity. The bonus you get from the form is pretty much non-existent because of the momentum generation needed. Okay. As far as like what I think it should be, at least, is I see a fighter, and so if you were going to go the mobility route of what a fighter should be, like if you did get a more mobile version of a fighter, because personally I think you should be a wrecking ball where you have survivability but massive damage with the sacrifice of mobility, but that's just my opinion. But if you went the mobility route, I would want to look at the fighter class as a pursuer, like you are the chaser. So you're always trying to get the hell away from the fighter. He doesn't necessarily need to have the most mobility of any class, but he should have enough in his kit to constantly be pursuing other classes at least somewhat efficiently, because some classes obviously should be able to outpace, other classes not so much.
Yeah. I guess we'll have to wait and see, because I think there's just a lot of buffing and nerfing that certain archetypes need to have. Fighter being, you know, one of them that needs a lot more. I wouldn't say a lot more. I think the fighter is is decent. I think it's just a lot of slight tweaks of abilities that need adjusting.
You want to know my hot take?
Oh, go ahead.
I think that depending on how dramatically the TTK changes, if the TTK gets dramatically slower, I think fighter right now, no changes, might actually be insanely overpowered. Agreed. And the reason I say that is because they've buffed the class over and over and over again in ways that don't matter. And my analogy for this is that right now we're in a war zone and everybody's got kitted out M4s, and fighters are samurai swords. And they're like, okay, we're going to buff samurai swords by another 50%. It's just like, well, the other guy's got an M4. Like, it doesn't matter. But next patch, if they take away the gunpowder, all of a sudden, we've got some badass samurai swords that aren't useless anymore. They buff the fighter in a lot of ways that don't really matter. And if we are having meaningful conflicts that actually like are a little bit like of a slog and actually have like some like a mid game and like something there, fighter actually might be crazy, like genuinely. But it depends, because you know they do apply the wound stacks like better than anyone else. They do have like a crazy burst combo. Again, doesn't matter. Momentum can be cool. Again, doesn't matter. Like so many of the fighter things are just like asterisk. Doesn't matter right now. Doesn't matter right now. But if all of those things all of a sudden did matter, ooh, we're in a different game. But who knows? We're just gonna have to wait and see.
So that's why I said earlier with the grain of salt thing, dude, where it's like most of my complaints could be fixed if TTK and gear was also tweaked and fixed.
Yep.
It's 100%, dude. I 100% agree with you.
All right, Zybak. This next one, it's going to be a doozy. So in massive sieges or node wars, or just any large PvP skirmishes, does the fighter carve out a clear role for itself, or does it get lost in the chaos?
That's great. That's why you see so many fighters right now. They're the new meta.
They're so meta that you just don't even use them.
Hang on. What number is that? Sorry, I had
13.
notes. That's
13.
13. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, it's terrible. If you actually try and play a fighter as a fighter, you will immediately die. Fighters right now are basically bow boys. You hold your bow and that's what you do the entire time. If you actually try to play as a melee DPS, you are done for. And at this point in the current game, where you have people literally hitting almost 600 magical power with these crazy consumables and like crafted shirts that for some reason have stats,
yeah, it's wacky.
It's crazy. So yeah. You guys want to hear my rant on how I fix this?
Oh yeah,
because I think this actually might be a problem even in a slower TTK. Like actually,
yes. Yep.
Oh,
hear it.
Okay.
So Intrepid, I know you might be listening and you've stolen a lot of my ideas that I've suggested, and feel free to steal this one because I think that it's fantastic. The core problem with fighter is that inherently it is not any tankier than a mage. Fighters and mages have the same durability, yet fighters have to put themselves at a ton of risk to actually do their damage. In large scale PvP, that is absolutely a death sentence because our only defensive ability is blood fusion. And that relies on uptime, so you have to be able to physically swing on people.
Right.
And it relies on our own damage, which obviously does not scale in these large fights because you're going to be taking far more damage than you actually put out, right?
Exactly.
Fix this particular problem that only exists in large scale PvP without making them insanely overpowered in small scale PvP and PvE. And my answer to that is have abilities that are modified by enemy players. Imagine if your Blitz gave you temporary health based off of the amount of enemy players within proximity of the Blitz. Think of Doomfist from Overwatch. You blitz in to a 30 players, you get temporary health for, I don't know, let's say 5 or 8 seconds. It scales off of the amount of players in that area, specifically players. And do this with like Blitz and Leap Strike. And again, this is temporary health, so you're not stepping on the toes of tanks, which should inherently just be tankier because they're tanks. And it's temporary health that only works on players. And and that would, in my opinion, feed into the fantasy of this rampaging berserker, where it's like you are a very, very temporary badass that will get dunked on outside of this particular instance. And I think Doomfist is a great like example of this in another game, where it's like, okay, he's, especially the DPS Doomfist back in Overwatch 1, where it's like he is a DPS, he can immediately die, but he has these little bursts where he can actually get in there and like punch people. And I think that would be a cool mechanic. They already have temporary health as a thing in the game. I think experiment with that. You're welcome, Intrepid. Go ahead and put it in the game. You can add my NPC into the game later. That's fine.
And what about you, Dolyem? How do you feel for like massive PvP skirmishes, like with the fighter? Does it have a role, a clear role in that fight, or does it get lost? Or does it not even get brought? Because that's what majority of people don't even bring fighters. If they're going to have like a skirmish, they're going to be rangers, they're going to be mages, they're going to be bards, they're going to bring clerics. They'll probably even bring a tank over a fighter right now, more so than the fighter.
So, I mean, we look at the more, I don't know how recent they were, but remember all the 8v8 tournaments? All the winners didn't have a single fighter on their team.
Yeah,
and there were some geared fighters too in that, by the way. Dude, Tanko was in that. He had like giga gear at the time, and still, yeah.
I mean that for right there speaks for itself. But to me, in large scale PvP, fighters are rangers and rogues without stealth and without ranged abilities. So they're literally just the useless version of a ranger or rogue with the way they fight, because you're either going to be in the back line shooting with your bow, and you have no abilities to utilize with that bow. You're just waiting for the
poor
time.
Man's ranger at that point.
Yeah, you're the poor man's ranger. You're building up your momentum and waiting for a time to jump in and probably get killed, because it's going to be a suicide rush more than likely. Or you're, to iterate on the rogue part, you're jumping in and out constantly. You're not frontlining. You're jumping in, smacking somebody, trying to get a one shot on someone low, and then jumping right back out. So you're doing the guerrilla tactics. But, you know, since you don't got stealth, you can't sneak around to get a better shot or whatever in the back line. So to me, it's large scale. Fighters are just the other DPS classes, but bad.
All right. And what about you, Burns? Like, how do you feel the fighter comes out when it comes to massive scale PvP?
Yeah, I think this is the biggest area where fighter is bad. I think you don't necessarily like need to change. I like the ideas that were discussed previously with augments. If you choose the tank augment, maybe you get some actual defensives, right? Because blood fusion, if you run in there, you pop blood fusion, but then you get rooted, like no one's around you. What are you supposed to do, right? You have zero defensives in that situation. But if you actually have a real defensive that doesn't count on uptime or you know, whatever other damage you can output, if you have an actual defensive ability, then that makes your decision making much easier. It doesn't need to last for super long or whatever, just long enough to get some kind of combo off to be a little effective. Because I have clips right now of like blitzing in, and as I'm going to get I was trying to like get a cataclysm off, but as Dolyem mentioned earlier, you go back and then you're dead, and then you're a pile of ashes, right? Like maybe make cat a charged ability, maybe like where you can like just tap it and it's a quick one. Who knows? But I mean,
I'm done with that.
You just get deleted so fast. So then I started trying to like backline dive, right? I was like, okay, let's create a little mayhem, right? So I sneak around on the side, and because our what happened to my audio? Oh, whoops!
Like
hey, camera got a little hot. Sorry.
Wait. Do that.
I can fix this. Hold on.
It's too hot in there, man. You're too good looking.
Yeah, I'm bringing up the heat, brother. Hold on there. Let's change to this one. There we go. Let's go. Backup camera for the win. Okay, anyways. So I started trying to like backline dive. So I went, I would go around, and because our mobility ranges are so long, I mean, I was out of most of the people's visual render distance, right? Because they
render
cheat right
distance
now.
still.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I would run around the side. I would see Jugs or I'd see Willow, like our healers, and then I would blitz to them, and I could go end cap them, and then I could just start like doing the Lord's work on them. But the moment my name got called out, and I'm going to show this in a clip in a future video, like a couple people turned and looked at me and just deleted me. All you have to do is look in that direction, hit tab, do whatever light attack you want, and deleted. The problem with it, like making the TTK longer too, is the mechanic is the same. If it's large scale and you have people diving in, all these high skill ranged players have to do is hit one button and target you, and their auto attacks kill you. So you need defensives. So where they do tab to target you and they attack you, you have to have something to combat that. Something where you can actually get abilities off, because right now you can't do it.
Yeah.
I do sort of hope they don't ever, I know they're probably going to, but I really hope they don't add an assist target. I think that's just a bad idea, to where you can like assist the target caller. Like, can we like at least have like targeting be at least a little bit of a skill check rather than like come on, man, like, because otherwise again it's just gonna, all the assist mechanic does is just enable ranged players to be even more dominant. Even when the game does get fixed TTK wise, like that's so powerful to be able to just hit like assist party leader, insta target, turret lock, 50 DPS, just smash one guy. Like that's crazy. I just don't think that should exist.
No. All right, well, let's go on to the next one. I really, Dolyem, this is yours. What's the most frustrating limitation or quirk of the fighter class that you'd want us to address in a future update?
It's hard to say, because like we've been saying this whole time, it's hard to say without them changing gear in TTK, because I like the fighter kit, and just like Zybak has been saying, it could be great, but you have to be able to use the abilities that you have. I will say the passives are pretty frustrating just because of how lackluster they are. But yeah.
Well, what about forms? So like, because you were talking about forms being like kind of a quirky, like how would you change forms to make them better?
I mean, well, take them off global cooldown.
Bridge.
Sure. And then I don't know, just make it so that they have some form of uniqueness to them. I think the idea where weapons could affect them differently would affect different loadouts.
What about different abilities? Do you think certain forms should have certain, like maybe like like a form of Furiosity highlights Maim and Cataclysm, while Celerity highlights like Overpower and
like almost
ability.
like it would almost be kind of like how Advantage works for rogues. How it's looking for them, where you could modify certain abilities. I think that'd be kind of cool, and that could be actually a useful momentum spender, actually, if you have like a specific momentum bonus to abilities you already have.
I mean, it does modify Overpower, but again, it goes back to what you said. It being on GCD, it's literally not worth doing from a purely DPS loss perspective. It's, even if you were the most giga brain player in the game, it's mathematically just, it's not worth the squeeze.
I think for me, when it comes to the design of the fighter, is actually a design flaw that I see in a lot of classes. Rogue actually is not one of them, and that's abilities actually in the actual tooltip of an ability actually interacting with another ability of that kit. I want where when you do headshot has or not headshot from, that's I'm thinking Ranger because what I'm currently playing, but let's say like like whirlwind, like whirlwind, for every hit that you get off a whirlwind takes off like 1 second off of the CD of Cataclysm, right? Like I want like where this ability has a direct interaction with this other fighter ability, like, and I think the fighter in a lot of other classes don't have that. Like everything feels very self-isolated with this ability. Like this ability has this function and that's it. There's no synergy or any interaction with another ability, and I just find that to be a little weird. You know what I mean?
You have a little bit of that.
Bleeds. It goes all around bleeds, is from what I can tell.
And that's kind of
it's just
boring.
synergies.
Like,
That's
you know,
it.
the
Sorry
synergies are so light and boring. Like I want them to have more meaningful to them.
There's
But
no
go ahead, Zybak.
there's no weight.
Yeah, there's no weight.
I mean, I guess I can maybe agree with the weightiness not being as compared to the rogue. Yeah, it's not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There is some of that with like especially the status effects that get applied, like your overpower applying your stagger versus applying a bleed versus applying a armor break. So you do have some of that there. So there is some interaction. It's just not at like the surface level, like tooltip level, whereas the rogue, it's like rogue's pretty cool. It's pretty
involved.
in that regard.
Exactly.
Yeah,
it makes it fun.
Whereas the fighter's a lot more minor, and I think the same kind of goes with the stances. It's like they do modify your abilities, but not in a way that is compelling or worthwhile due to maybe tuning, and I guess just to piggyback off his stances thing, I'm okay with it being a minor thing that like the best players min-max, and it's like this thing you can never do optimally where you're constantly dancing around your stances to maximize your overpower debuffs. I think that would be fun. I mean, I'm a sweat lord, whatever, right? But we don't even have that. It's just not that the juice isn't worth the squeeze in any capacity. So yeah. Sorry.
No, it's okay. What about you, Burns? Like, how do you feel? Like, what do you feel like some of the fighter shortcomings are when you play the kit and you're level 25 on it, and you've been playing it for a little while now. Like, what would you say to the devs if you could be like, if I could change the fighter, like this is like my biggest gripe with the fighter?
Yeah, survivability and large scale PvP. That's it.
So for you actually really enjoy like the rotation, you enjoy its abilities, you enjoy the kind of synergies from the fighter. Like,
yeah, and in fact, Zybak was talking about how like you have to choose form of celerity, but I actually like fluidity and large scale PvP just for the movement or the
movement speed,
the evasion. It just, I mean, when you get bombarded with arrows to like a split second after you get within range, I mean, any little bit can matter. So I use that there. So I think there are some give and takes, but otherwise, really, it just needs to be survivability. It plays like a bad rogue in large scale PvP. So just needs to be more survivable.
Okay. And is there anything you want to add, Zybak, as far as just limitations?
I think everybody that plays the fighter likes the like conceptual like combos. Like I think it's the most satisfying class, like in terms of like the visuals and the feel, and like cutting somebody down on a fighter just has like, I mean, I've got some YouTube shorts and people are like, what game is this? This looks insane, because like it does just have that feel that's 100%. Like when you do it, you do it. It's like, but yeah, I think there's just other factors. I don't want them to change anything about the class until they change the time to kill, because the class has genuinely a ton of stuff going for it. Which is why I said my hot take, it might currently right now, if the conditions of the game change, might actually be insanely overpowered, because we have a lot of things right now that people just aren't factoring in, the wound application, the damage combos, the sleeper, which is the best crowd control uptime in the game with our really low cooldown wallop trip. Like that's crazy. But again, when people die in 2 seconds, like, yeah.
Well, so, and this kind of goes into the next question. I mean, Burns, it's probably going to be the same thing, right? It's like, because how dependent is the fighter feel for healers when they're in large scale PvP? Like Nice did a video of his whole group getting healed by clerics, and they still just die. What was it, 1.7 seconds? Like, so
yeah. And I've had really, really good healers. I mean, we're talking Willow, D-Jugs, like these guys are very, very good. And now I'm in Barcode, and we've got Yellow. Like we've got a bunch of really good healers in Barcode too, which has been fun. I just haven't done as much PvP with Barcode yet, but like even with very good healers, it's tough because it is a melee class. You have to be within range of your cleric, and usually the clerics are in the back line of the back line, right? Like there's the ranged line, and then there's the healers line behind them. You are going out of healing range to do anything because you're a melee class. You don't have any ranged abilities. So yes, they can throw some soothing glow on you. Yes, they can throw the one where if you die you come back up. I don't like that ability, the way that it plays out, because you don't know if it procced or not. It's the what's the name of that one where if you die when it's on you, it's the hot, you come back. Chat's gonna know.
Cleric, I don't know that ability. Defiant Light?
Yeah. Defiant Light, thank you. So I would like to know, hey, that procced, like, because that's super useful. But then you come back with 25% health and you're instantly dead again. So the
prismatic beam was still going, and you come back just to get hit by
yes,
I've seen that shit. It's wacky. And so, like, I guess we'll go into you, Zybak, like, because I feel like with healers, and again, I think the TTK thing has been such a huge issue, and I remember you saying this in the video, and I definitely agree with you. And I even mentioned it to Steven in Discord, and because I asked him, how does the team feel about like a blanket 50% just damage reduction? And it's not because I want that to be a thing. I want to see, by doing that, what does TDK length look like? Like, by just executing that, like a 50% just damage reduction, like how long would TTK be in these large scale skirmishes? How long would it be in these 1v1, 2v1 skirmishes? And we also kind of need to look at gear dependency too, right? Like if someone's in all like uncommons with sprinkle with some rares compared to someone who is in all rare sprinkle with some heroics, like clearly they're gonna have an advantage, but how much of an advantage should they have when it comes to gear advantage? You know what I'm saying? Like all that stuff needs to be kind of seen in this test.
I mean, the only addendum I would make, and I've been shilling the Band-Aid fix for having just a modifier on PvP flag players to reduce damage, and also you have to reduce the healing, because the healing is crazy as well. You have healers healing for 150%. Health bars right now like are kind of just like irrelevant. Like they just, because they're so volatile and they move so quickly, to piggyback off Burns, there's two guys in our guild, Chase and Yellow, who are probably two of the most geared individuals in the game, like in the world maybe. And Chase, the fighter, was fully hotted, like that he was good, and then he just gets literally one shot, like Mage Blink, Lightning Bolt, Firebolt, like done, lights out, double crit, like that's where we're at right now. Abilities are doing 70% of people's damage, and I'm in a measly 400 physical power, and I can 3-shot people still. So you got guys approaching 600 now. It's just, it's hard to really have real suggestions when we haven't really played the game in a serious way since the Sticks and Stones days.
Well, I mean, I think they're probably, and it seems to me that they're actually probably going to do more of a reformulation of the base stats. I think they're going to completely nerf power in general. Like, I think power across the board, they're probably reformulating things to where, because if they're going to do that, that would mean every PvE thing would also need to be nerfed as far as damage scaling too, right? So you have like let's say a 1-star bear that usually has like 2200 health might have like 1200 health now, because now we're going to be doing just less damage across the board, and I'm fine with that personally. I mean, again, we're level 25 in a game where max level is going to be level 50. You think of any other MMORPG, when you're like halfway through the max level, like you shouldn't be going all crazy and everything like that. But I understand that because of this limitation, like we're able to craft like potential legendary gear or epic gear, and then we have the enchanting, which also has its share of issues, and and then there's also going to be other power modifiers that are going to be coming up in the future, like tempering, like jewel crafting and socketing. Like there's going to be even more vertical power in the future, which I don't know how they're going to have to do it at a base level, and actually probably recalculate how enchanting, like completely redo how enchanting is going to work. Oh, I was talking to you, Zybak. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. There's just a lot of vertical power you can gain right now.
Yeah.
If I had to guess what they're going to do with the enchanting system, they're going to make it percentage based, where it modifies the piece of gear a percentage of the base stats.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would do. If I had to, I guess, have it my way with the stat progression, I would have, especially towards the high end, you get less. It's just heavy diminishing returns on the min-max, like legendary Giga Gear is just not that much better than like your, I don't know, have like, I guess, more the soft power caps. I mean, right now it's just kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's where like the epic, like the higher you go up the rarity, the less you bang for your buck you get. So I don't know. I think probably that might be a better direction to go in general, because PvPers are going to min-max. If they can get a minuscule amount of stat, they will absolutely still do it. Like they're still going to do it, but
right.
Maybe they shouldn't be dramatically more powerful, right?
So I wanted to ask Dolyem, I think you're up, right?
Yes.
When paired with other DPS classes like the Ranger, potentially the Rogue coming up, Mage, like, does the fighter amplify the party in any way, or do you feel like the fighter doesn't really add anything? Because the thing with having the 8 archetypes was that every archetype was meant to be brought to the group. What the fighter should be bringing something to the group that is essential for group composition. And at least from my opinion, I feel like the fighter, it doesn't really add enough to the kit to make it seem like, why can't we just double up on Bard or double up on Rogue potentially or anything like that? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'm only there for moral support. I'm just like, you guys are doing great. I'm just gonna keep using my bow back here.
Yeah.
But and also, I didn't actually get to answer the healer one.
Oh shit! I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
But you'll like this because I do have a sort of what's the word? Synergy with fighter and healers when it comes to PvP.
Okay.
And even though the initial attack, you're gonna die. So this is part of the tactic. You rush into a fight and you die right in the middle of the freaking group. And immediately, I'm looking at you, Pockets, you get a res. And you wait for them to push up, and then you res behind them and smack them with the Cataclysm.
Shit.
That is strats there.
That is the only positive class combo with healers and fighters that I could really think of as it currently goes, because otherwise, like these guys are saying, you can't heal them for the amount of damage that you're taking in such a short amount of time.
Do you think potentially they could add, because I love buffs, like I think group buffs are really cool, and we're talking about forms. I really think forms could potentially be redesigned to be group based, so the whole group takes part if you have a fighter, right? And you could even have it to where it's 2-part, to where you have a more empowered form of Furiosity and the group has like a lesser form. So they can do certain things like that, but I think they should make it to where like you actually want a fighter, even in PvE. Like in PvE, you kind of don't care if a fighter's there or is there or isn't there, right? You know what I mean? Like most of the time you actually
PvE,
don't want...
you do damage. Like
well,
PvE, you are dealing out a lot of AoE damage and shit, but
not like relative to
not like mages.
Yeah,
not like mages, bro. So it was nuts, man. In our leveling, when we were leveling with dopamine, I had just hit 20. I was level 24. I hit level 25, and I rotated out of the leveling group. And the mobs that we were killing, it was kind of a DPS check in the tropics. Anyway, so a level 21 mage replaces me, they're killing, and my gear wasn't bad, and this mage's gear was bad. They were killing the mobs faster with a level 21 mage as opposed to a level 24,
Yeah, that's
almost 24 fighter. Like it was stupid, right? Like it is like in an 8-man, you would much rather have 2 mages as opposed to a mage and 1 fighter. We do provide some benefit, and I tried to always make a big deal about this one with my group when we were in Carfin.
You gotta get the group slots. You gotta lobby.
Yeah.
A fighter lobby.
So when we would, when
100%.
a zombie thaumaturge would get pulled and we were fighting like some other group, I would go babysit the thaumaturge because I could slap him and I could trip him, right? When he was going to do his plague vomit. So instead of a complete group wipe, I was able to go be a babysitter on a ZT and keep him from killing everyone, you know, casting the anti-heal thing. So that was very valuable. But beyond that, damage isn't great, and also you have to be in melee range to be effective. And so the problem is you're getting all the swipe, you're getting the side punches from all the mobs too, and there doesn't really seem to be any compensation for that. High risk, high reward, right? Well, in this case, it's high risk and
nothing.
You're punished for it.
You're punished.
So yeah, that needs to be addressed because there's really a decreased damage output from the fighter who is up close compared to the mage who's far away.
Right. And what about you, Zybak? Like how do you feel like a fighter goes in the sense of the 8 archetypes? Like where should the fighter shine to where players want a fighter in their group?
Oh, yeah, it's tough right now because other than our very high uptime crowd controls, and the problem with that is those lose value because the mobs CC DR and other classes also have CC. So like maybe if we were living in a world where PvE mobs didn't have like crowd control DR, then there would genuinely be a reason to bring fighters because of our like ability to lock mobs down. But the fact that, you know, you reach those DRs so quickly, especially with other people in the group CCing, it's tough for the fighters because they don't have a unique thing. Like Bard, for example, brings tons of very unique Bard specific things to the group.
Absolutely.
Mages bring their unique specific thing and just being gods and doing godly damage and no one else can touch them. And a fighter doesn't really have that. Now there was an instant where fighter almost was like maybe wanted, and that was when the mobs were healing, the 3-star mobs were healing, and wound affected their passive regen. Like, and then I was like, oh, hang on, there's a reason to bring a fighter now. But no, other than that, there really isn't any, like, you're just better off bringing another class in almost every instance. It's unfortunately that just really is the case right now.
I mean, it's almost like some guilds aren't recruiting fighters and they're telling their fighters to roll other classes.
They know all the tech though. I mean, shit.
It's tech. It's called tech. That's what it's called.
I think mages are also in this same camp too, because if we lived in a world where mages and fighters did the same amount of damage, like what do mages bring to the group, like overall? You know,
they do it safer and from range.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and that's, I think, sort of my point, like, right. And, you know, we think of like kind of like the Trinity, right. And where, you know, the tank is for this job and the healer does this job and the bard is kind of doing these other jobs. Right. And I think as a DPS, like, are we just satisfied with, well, that's it, right. That's our only job. Like I would like if, because there's only 8 base archetypes, for them to bring something actually unique to the table, similar to the bard, right? And it could be even in a niche scenario, but I mean, I would think like a very easy thing for the fighter is to just bring like a fucking 10% physical damage increase, like just like a you know, blessing of power or whatever.
That's something they could add that in pretty easily with like a talent. I mean, that's what World of Warcraft has done in the past, where it's like you have this spec that's like, you know, I'd give it Mark of the Wild, you know, give it whatever the Feral Druids have the longest time, the 3% crit, you know, just give them that. They'll want that.
Right.
And there is the shout that gives riled or whatever, so you attack faster.
Yeah.
It's also your CC break at the same time. You gotta say
riled is a CC resistance.
Is it? Oh no, yeah.
Riled is so impactful that most people watching this don't even know what that is, and they've never heard that word before. They don't even know. And
That's fair.
30% disable evasion for 10 seconds.
Yeah, I was thinking about the opposite one, the weakened it puts on the enemies where it decreases.
Yeah, that's
how
only
fast they swing.
yeah. But the other people can put that up though too. So yeah.
It's meh.
So
it could be interesting if they added different shouts for buffing the party.
See them going that direction. That would actually be kind of cool.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna kind of, because I'm looking at these other questions, and I really feel like the momentum stuff, we've talked about that a lot.
Yep.
I just want to go, of course, down the table. So Burns, with you, like, give me anything with the fighter that you would want to discuss. Good things, bad things, like whatever final thoughts you may have on the fighter to make it better. Even good things, like to say like, hey, I really love this, keep doing this, don't change this. Because I think even with Blizzard, man, there would be so many things that I loved about it, and then there'd be a patch later of where they redesigned that ability that no one asked to be redesigned, or they took away a passive that no one asked for to be taken out. So like I try to always give like the praise where it should be needed, because I just don't want Intrepid to change anything that we actually like. You know what I'm saying? Like don't break what isn't, or don't what is it? Don't break what isn't fixed, or fix what isn't broken. Whatever. I don't know. Go for it, Burns.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
There you go.
Yeah, so I like several things about the fighter, the class fantasy, right? I like fighter's interesting because it has a high skill floor. When I was first learning the class coming from cleric, very bad at it, and it took a while to actually understand how the synergies worked and stuff. I thought that was fun. I thought that was unique. I like being a melee DPS. You have to, in PvE, you have to be very cognizant of what the mob is doing, and that's a new gameplay layer for me, from normally being a healer, just throwing out my heals in the back, looking at health bars the whole time. I think this is a very engaging class to play. I think a lot of people play this class because they think it's an investment. Right now, you're putting money into it. I mean, you're buying Bitcoin and it's 10 cents, right? And you're hoping that eventually it's going to hit 100K is what's going on, because currently it is not very useful. You're better off rolling mage. A lot of people have done that. They've abandoned the fighter to go play a different class, or they're going to not play it and they're going to play rogue instead. So it is a higher risk class because you are melee, because there's that distance, a lot of risk there. We're missing the reward part though. So I would like to see it reward a little bit more. And then also the investment that we're putting in now, where we're learning the class, the ins and outs, what a lot of people want it to pay off for in the future is that it actually will matter somewhat in large scale PvP. I mean, I would hope, because like when you see castle sieges, there are zone capture mechanics where you have to occupy a zone in order for you to capture that. And sure, you could just send all your tanks there, but you'd probably like to have some DPS guys around there too. So my guess is that fighters should be useful in situations like this. So having defensives, being able to live just a little bit longer when you think you're in danger, I think it'd be huge. Give us one more defensive ability, like a true defensive ability.
Absolutely.
And I would be completely satisfied with the class.
Yeah, give me a 30% power mitigation or something like that for like five or 8 seconds.
Creative ways they could do it.
Yeah, 100%. And what about you, Zybak? Like just all out final thoughts of like, if you had Steven in your ear right now, like what would you tell him about the fighter? Good things, bad things, things you would like to see change, anything?
I think for the most part, like 10,000 foot view, I think it's good. Like I think that the class fantasy, like the gameplay flow, for the most part, it's really good. Right now, it is incredibly difficult to give like accurate feedback when we're in this like rocket powered, stat world that we're in right now. In terms of like nitty gritty mechanics, I'd like to see changed. Obviously, I'm not going to do the whole temporary health rant on Blitz and
it's a good rant though.
That is a good rant, and they're gonna. I'm sure they'll put that into the game because it's such a good idea. I would like to see the fighter play out like Doomfist did in Overwatch 1 with temporary health on your movement skills. I think that'd be cool as fuck. Scale it based off players. Cool. I would also like to see the stances. Come on, guys, just take them off. Make it function like Blood Fusion. I think it would be far more interesting to have this. Even if the momentum buffs are minor, which I think is fine. Have it be this like micromanaged thing that you never can do perfectly. That's always this thing you're working to improve, where it's like, oh, I switched to fluidity to have my overpower now apply a shaken, and then I switch back because now my stun is up again. Like, I think you could get really cool with that and have it not be something that would dramatically increase the power of the class in a significant way, but also increase like the skill expression dramatically. So, yeah, I think overall though, like the gameplay flow is good. So, large scale PvP, I think they're going to have to actually make like some mechanical adjustments to whether that be different abilities, because I do think that even in a slower TTK in the large scale fights, there just is a large mechanical disadvantage to any melee, but especially one like fighter that's, all about like being in the fight active and not about like evasion. For example, like the rogue, right? The rogue has lots of things that give them evasion. And the difference between evasion and like mitigation is that evasion like scales, like things like dodge, like that actually is useful when there's more than one person hitting you. Whereas lifesteal, not really. Like you're kind of limited by what you do. So I think they're gonna have to do some mechanical tweaks, but overall good. And that's my rant.
I would love, honestly, because I figured because off tanks are potentially going to be a thing. I would love there's a thing from WoW for the brew house or the brewmaster monk. It's stagger, and so as you take damage, every portion of it comes like a dot that you take. So you take a portion of the damage physically, but then there's like a stagger effect that happens. It'd be awesome if the fighter had that. Because then you could actually become like an off tank in that sense. And it would give a lot more viability in large scale battles, knowing that you're taking like 60% of the damage, but 40% you're taking in this dot. That's like, in 8 seconds, you're going to take that 40% damage and it accumulates. That would be awesome. And I just want to ask a quick question to you, Zybak, because I want to ask everybody eventually. Are you a proponent for stance dancing if the cooldown and everything was removed, like in a perfect world? If it was
instant cast, like Blood Fusion is, where it doesn't interrupt your combos, absolutely. I think that would be very fun, and I think it's something they should do, because it is a nearly endless level of like skill expression that. Because like you have to be a little careful adding stuff like this to games, because if you make it like harder to play, then you have to make it better, and then it just becomes like the thing you have to do, and it becomes inaccessible to like lower skilled players. But this is something that would not dramatically increase the power of the class, but is something that the sweatiest players would absolutely go and do like frame data on and try and really min-max, and it would just be a fun mechanic if that was totally off the global cooldown, and you could really micromanage your overpower debuff management. Like that would add a level of crazy complexity that is basically voluntary, and I think would be good.
Okay. And Burns, just real quick, are you a proponent of stance dancing if done correctly?
Yeah. I think Zybak said that better than I could. I think Zybak also, if he could have his way, he would change. Everyone wants to change the name of the tank class. Zybak would want to change the name of the fighter class from fighter to murderer, I think is the name he'd want.
Damn. Okay. All right, Dolyem. Final thoughts. Anything you want to say, good, bad, ugly? Like, how has been your play time with the fighter?
Well, for starters, I pretty much agree with both of y'all. 100%, and same with the stance dancing. I liked stance dancing back in like the old WoW days and stuff like that, where certain abilities got unlocked while you did it. I thought it was really cool mechanics that way. I think the real thing with fighters and quote unquote fixing them is just TTK and gear balancing and all that. I think you have to do that before you change anything with the classes. And that's not even just fighter. It's every class. But I can also give you a super hot take regarding the fighter, though.
And
you all might hate me for this. It's kind of a lot of audacity here, but I think there should have only been 7 classes. Tank and fighter should be the same class.
Ooh.
Because all you would have to do is build it out to either be tanky or DPS. In every single MMO that not every single MMO because there's like Guild Wars and all that, but most MMOs, the warrior fulfilled both the tank and the DPS role.
Right.
So you could also get rid of the damn name for tank and just call it a fighter. So that would fix a lot of other people's problems because a lot of people hate the tank name or whatever. But it's also, that's saying a lot because you couldn't do it at this point, in my opinion, with where we're at in development. You can't just like, we're going to delete one of these classes and combine the two or whatever.
Right.
And you no longer have 64 archetypes. Now you only have, 8 less than that or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's would it be able to be done? I don't even know. But I think that's how it should have been in the first place, is just having those be the same class and you build it out to what you would want to be role wise.
Well, and this is I've never been a proponent of the 64 class system. I've always been afraid of it. I've had my issues and problems with it. There needs to be a lot of variety with tanks and healers specifically, because you go to any other MMO, you have immediately 6 or 7 tanking options right at the character creator. Same thing with healer. You get 1 in Ashes. 1. So if your tank or if your talent tree does not offer the diversity to be the kind of tank that you're coming from your MMO, there's a problem. And again, I've talked to many healers, main healers, that come and only heal in other MMOs that are playing Ashes of Creation, and guess what? They aren't playing Cleric. They're playing Bard, or they're playing something else. And that's the same thing with tank mains. They're not playing tank. They are playing something else. That should show you that having a very rigid and one-dimensional style isn't going to appeal to everyone. And the other problem is then convincing that person to spend 100 hours to then go to level 25 to then potentially augment yourself with your secondary class to then potentially being able to tank or heal the way you want. That's a hard sell.
To iterate on that, because I also saw in the chat, someone was mentioning like, well, tank and fighters are only half a class because you got the next 25 levels for augments. The only reason I hate that argument is because you still have to have a class identity the first 25 levels.
Right.
Like you can't just go 1 to 25 and be like, oh, well, don't worry about the 1 to 25. You're going to get to 50 one day, so don't worry about that primary class experience without the archetype. It's sure you're going to have an archetype in the future, but you still have to have valid gameplay without that archetype if you're having an experience of 1 to 25.
Right. And again, I think the fighter, like even in its one dimension of playing it, because I think every base class falls into this. I think even the Bard probably is a little bit more multidimensional, but I think every class just has a one way in how you play it. Like Ranger has one way, Fighter has one way, Mage has one way. Like there isn't really any other ways to play it. And I find that to be a little problematic. And I think potentially when they add the 30 to 40 abilities with more passive options, that can change at a base level without needing augments. But to convince someone to wait until then, most people that quit an MMO quit within the first hour. You know, so if the thing that they want to do isn't present, they're just not going to wait for it. They're not going to grind out something they don't like to then go to something they do. That's not how gamers operate. But that's that's like my feedback on it, because again, I've even asked Steven in the interview that I had with him about the 64 class, and I told him straight up, I'm not a fan of this system, but y'all designed it this way. This is what y'all wanted. We'll see what happens. Again,
it's all feedback.
Yep. Guys, thank y'all so very much for coming on and chatting with me on this fighter roundtable discussion. I just want to go around the table, give y'all's outros, where people can find you and everything. Zybak, let's go with you, brother. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, yeah, push to talk. Brain fart. YouTube.com/ZybakTV, ZYBAKTV. That's where I post my videos, and that's the main thing. So, yeah, check it out.
Yep. And I believe in the YouTube description, if you're watching on YouTube, if you go to the description box, you'll see the link for Zybak's channel. And Dolyem, where can people find you at?
I mean, I'm not like a YouTuber.
Join
Suspect.
Really, but go to Suspect.
Go to suspect.com. We will be awesome mercenaries and whoop ass for you guys if you pay us enough.
Damn right.
I mean, I guess self-plug. It's not really even a self-plug. I do memes for fun for Ashes of Creation. So if you ever want to see funny memes, I actually created the forum post on the forums. It's like 50,000 views already, but I just make random ass memes every once in a while. Haven't done it in a minute, but you guys might like them. They're kind of funny. They make fun of stuff and poke fun of people.
Yeah, he has good memes. He has good memes.
And Burns is look at Burns' second camera died. There's our sign.
But yeah, go to Suspect is the guild I'm part of. We love PvP. We have some pretty interesting characters over there. I'll spare you the details on our shot caller V-Man, weaponized autism. We love PvP and we love killing stuff. If you want to join us and get paid to kill stuff, it'd be great. But yeah,
all right,
hit us up.
And of course, our infamous Dr. Burns. Where can people find you at, brother?
At the Copium Clinic. You can find me there on YouTube. Some 1v1s with your boy Vladis. You can find me in a lot of Zybak shorts being farmed for content, and on the YouTubes.
All right. Well, guys, thank y'all so much for coming and talking. Next week, I will have the Mage Roundtable discussion coming up, which will be very, very, very interesting.
Get ready for the cope.
Oh, my God.
Get ready for the cope.
Who's coming?
Actually, it's really hard.
Dude, they live a hard life, man. They're just, it's hard.
Creatures can't appreciate our mage gameplay. The way we blink a lightning bolt and fireball 3 times.
It's too complicated, man. Like, then you gotta dumb it down a little bit. But yeah, I don't want to say who my guests are going to be. I have 2 guests confirmed, so I guess I'll name them. Crix from Envious, and then I have our boy V-Man from Suspect, who is one of the mage leads for the guild, and then I'm still waiting for the third for confirmation to see. But I believe it will be, of course, next week, either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, depending on what guests deem the best for all 3. But I'm really excited about the mage one. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to discuss about that, and it's going to be similar to the bard because I think mages still need some nerfs potentially, but it depends on the whole TTK.
I give mages a hard time, but I will say, yeah, that's the thing, right? That I think mages are just incredibly powerful in the current environment. I don't necessarily think it's the class. Like, I don't want the class to get nerfed. I want the other stuff to get changed first, and then let's see where we're at.
Right.
Because I think it's mainly just their kit is super good in this environment. Yeah. That's most of it.
Yeah. And I think once we have like TTK in a way that feels good, because again, I had so many people saying that they had a shit ton of fun whenever people were on those fresh start servers with like everybody had the same gear. They said PvP was like the most fun they've had in a long time. So clearly,
it's more fun in bad gear.
Yeah, and I think they need to just do something like, because I also, and I don't want to go too much on this, but I just think gear also should matter, but it shouldn't matter in the jumps and leaps it does with the rarities, because if you worked hard to get those gatherables at heroic or epic level, like you should feel that, but it shouldn't feel like a 10% increase. You know what I mean? Like something wild that it feels a little bit unobtainable between like rare and heroic, right? Like I think that's where some of the power delineation needs to be kind of squished down. So maybe if they do the rebalancing the base stats like that, they might just do that pretty well with the gear. But anyway, guys, thank you. Or go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say max levels, regardless of quality of gear, you shouldn't be one-shotting someone at the same level as you.
As a tank, agreed. That's not your part of the Trinity, sir. You stay back. All right, guys. Well, thank you all so much for coming and watching, and we will see you guys next week. So come on by. Take care.
Later.
Thanks for showing.